Good morning. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. We are in the book of Genesis. We're in the 42nd chapter. We've been going through Genesis since last March. Dismiss. Okay, so um, we're just going to dive right in. Thank you for waiting for me as I rush through the shower. So, Genesis chapter 42. Joseph has been sold off by his brothers. He's ended up at Potiphar's house, got in trouble at Potiphar's house, ended up in prison. Somehow, though, not somehow, God used his gift to get him in front of Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams about there being 7 years of plenty. And in that case, in that 7 years of plenty, they take all the food and store it up. God's wisdom was given to them how to handle that. Because sometimes you have plenty and you think, oh, this is going to last forever. It's like, no, it's going to last for 7 years. And there's going to be 7 years of lean times. And the lean times will be so bad that you'll even forget that the 7 years of plenty happened. Now, that doesn't always happen in that way. It just happens in this case that the 7 years are going to be so bad that the skinny cows would eat up the fat cows in the dream. And the skinny cows stayed skinny. That's how bad it was. So they stored up food. And this was assigned actually to all the nations because why does Egypt have food? How did Egypt know? Because there was a man with the Spirit of God in him who warned them. And so when all these nations had to come to Egypt, they all heard the story. You know, the God of Israel spoke to Joseph, and right, they all knew the story. I mean, if they asked, if they inquired. So um, the only one who doesn't know the story are Joseph's brothers because they're isolated. They don't live in a country. They don't have a network. There's this little family living in Shechem, or yeah, and so they have no communication. In fact, it was 2 years before they found out that people were going to Egypt. And traders would go back and forth, and they lived near a trading route. And finally, I guess they asked because the father said, "Hey, look, people are going. There must be food in Egypt." So they didn't know anything. So they will go down there, and they don't know that it's their long lost brother who's in charge. They recognize nothing. Joseph recognized them, though. Now, he'd had a dream about his brothers bowing down to him, and sure enough, they're bowing down to him, but he's not interpreting the dream correctly. Uh, when he had the dream, he was in the land of Israel. So his assumption, oh, I'm going to own this land, and my brothers are going to bow down and they're going to work for me. Uh, uh, he didn't know that the bowing down would take place in Egypt. And that's part of the problem when God gives us a little piece. We don't just hold on to that little piece. We normally write more of it, we add to it, right? So here are his brothers bowing down to him. And his interpretation of it, probably at this time, is aha, this is why I had that dream, because they were going to come groveling to me in repentance and I could punish them or something. He's still not seeing the true story, the true purpose for it all, which is God is teaching a lesson to the Israelites and therefore to us that when dire times come ahead, God's way prepared for it. God doesn't find out about bad things when we do. That's why our prayers don't have to be so informational. Lord, you may not know this, but yesterday my car got in a wreck. He knew that eons ago before you were born. He was already preparing and had the solution ready for you. So if we have an attitude of God's trying to figure it out instead of, I wonder what provision God provided. God told him that this was going to happen. Then we can clearly see what his will is. So Joseph is not seeing what God's will is right now because he placed an interpretation on the dream. He cries 3 times. So there's several things we're going to be finding out. He cries 3 times during his brother's times there, and each time that he cries, um, there's actually a breaking of a stronghold in Joseph's life that was keeping him from seeing the full picture. He had told himself a story based on circumstances, based on things that had happened to him. He told himself a story about God, about life, about how the world works, because that's what we all do, right? Life's not fair, or whatever lesson we learned, you can't trust anybody or something. None of this is true, but we tell ourselves something as children, as we're growing up, and sometimes that prevents us from recognizing what God is doing on our lives. So, if anything, this is the story how to recognize what God is doing so that you can more fully cooperate with it and not be stressed out while it's happening. Fortunately, our knowledge of the situation doesn't stop God from doing what he's going to do. Even though sometimes people teach that, you've got to know and you've got to direct your angels and tell them, like the angels don't know what to do, like we know more than angels. And so it's sometimes taught that it puts us too much in charge, right? We do have a part to play, which is to be obedient to what God is telling us to do. We're not actually in charge of these situations. We're the servants. But sometimes it's taught, what we need to do, and we miss out. So this is, uh, we don't stop God. That's the good news. We're not bigger than God. But we can go through a lot of stress while God is doing what he's doing because we don't understand it. We can be, so Joseph can either be like Peter in the prison, who they were singing songs when they were put in prison because they knew God was going to rescue them, right? The second time. The first time he wasn't singing no song. He was like, oh no, I'm in prison. But the second time he was singing because like, okay, God's got this handled, right? And this is what this is one reason why God did this way. I want to show you that when something that you consider a calamity, something that you considered like this horrible thing, I knew about it way in advance. I have prepared a Joseph to go before you to meet you there in that horrible situation and to show you, the way out that I've already provided. So that's the lesson Joseph's trying to learn. That's the lesson his brother's trying to learn. So Joseph sees his brothers bowing down, and he thinks it's his time to get revenge on them, right? So in Genesis chapter 42, so Joseph recognized his brothers. This is chapter 42, verse 8. He recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dream, which he had dreamed about them. I remember them bowing down. So he immediately said, oh, I forgive you. And no, that's not what he did. So he said to them, you're spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land, right? He's accusing them. And they said to him, no, my Lord, but your servants, we're here to buy food. Like, why would we be spies? We are all of one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. So that he's saying, we're all one man's sons. He wouldn't have, no father is going to send his sons on a dangerous mission and risk losing them. We're all from one family. So that would be crazy, right? But he said to them, no, you're spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. So he just keep repeating his story because he's trying to see what he can get them to confess. He can't say, I already know that you're brother, because he's trying to hide his identity. So I'll just keep accusing them and see what they say. Because he knows nothing. He hasn't seen his brothers in 13 years. Actually, it's 15 years at this point. And his father could be dead. He notices Benjamin is not there. Benjamin could be dead. He has no ideas. And if he forces some truth out of them, because his last experience with them is that they're liars. Come here, Joseph. Come here. We got something to show you. This well, boom, and he throws them in. So I don't know if I can trust these brothers of mine. So I'll just keep pressing to see what they say. So verse 12, it says, they said to him, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. So they repeat that. In fact, the youngest is with our father today, and the other is no more. So here's that. I wonder if that's true. I wonder if Benjamin's still alive. Because his thought is Benjamin is not alive. They tried to kill me. Why would they not kill Benjamin? Those 6 brothers from Leah, they hate the 2 of us from Rachel. Those were the 2 main wives that were feuding that Joseph married. And Joseph always favored Rachel, and he favored Joseph and Benjamin. He is partly responsible for how Reuben and Levi and Simeon and all of them, Judah, how they turned out Issachar, Zebulon, because Jacob really ignored that part of the family. So he caused a lot of the enmity between them. So Joseph's thinking, Benjamin could be dead. So he says, one is still my father. I wonder if that's true, or they're just saying that so that they won't get in trouble. So Genesis 42:16 says, send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that yours may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. So he put them together in prison in 3 days, right? I want you to think about it. You pick one person to go, and I'll make the rest of you stay. So during this time, there, when he says this to them, and they don't know he can speak Hebrew, right? Because he's speaking them through an interpreter, because he's still keeping up his facade. In verse 21, they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us." And we know especially, so I'm just going to remind us of that pattern of that, I mean, of what happened, right? Back in Genesis 37, when Joseph is on the way and they're all plotting to kill him. We find out later in the story that the main instigators of the plot were Simeon and Levi, and the main person was Simeon. We know that for a couple reasons. Simeon had showed himself. Do I cover this later? Not okay. Okay. So Simeon and Levi had led the attack on Hamor, Dinah's attacker, their sister, and Hamor, the prince of Shechem, had raped their sister, and so they led this attack and not only killed him, but they killed like all the men. And this was led by specifically Simeon and Levi. The Bible points that out for a reason. Because let me tell you the other thing that goes on here. These chapters are showing us three things: why Joseph cried 3 times, and so and the same sort of strongholds that are on him are in our lives that prevent us sometimes from seeing what God is doing. It's showing us ultimately why God picked Judah instead of Joseph to have the Messiah to come through. And these passages also show what happened with Simeon and Levi, and why Simeon ultimately got in big trouble and Levi became priests. So there's a lot of information in these chapters. So he says, "We saw the anguish of his soul and we wouldn't hear. We blocked it out." So let's just remember that when they saw Joseph approaching, Genesis 37, verse 21, it says, "And Reuben heard their plan," right? Reuben heard it because they said, "We're going to kill him." And he delivered them out of their hands and said, "Lo, no, let's not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood." So this is Reuben sticking up for him, right? "But cast him into the pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him." Just throw them into the pit. Now, why is Reuben doing this? Because Reuben had been in trouble for years with his own father, for sleeping with his father's wife, because at this one of the maids, because at this point Reuben was trying to show his dominance because he was being cheated out of his birthright in his mind. You're favoring Joseph, and I'm the oldest, and I'll show you I can be a man. I'll sleep with one of your wives. Okay, how did that work out for you? So Reuben is quick to be the one to defend Joseph because he's trying to get back under his father's good graces. So he says this that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. This is Genesis 37. So it came to pass in verse 23 of Genesis 37 that when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. This is the first time he's stripped of his costume. He's stripped again by Potiphar's wife when she grabs hold of him and he runs out. This is twice God has gotten him naked, trying to show him something. And at the end, we'll see what that is. Then they took him and cast him in the pit, and the pit was empty. There's no water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. So he's screaming and crying. Joseph begging for his life. He's totally shocked. This is the first time it ever occurred to him that his brothers may not like him, even though the Bible said over and over they hated him. They could not speak peacefully to him. They hated him even more every time he told them a dream. This went over his head. So this is a shock to him, and he's crying. And why are you doing this? And they're nothing. They're sitting there eating, and so this makes a traumatic impression on him, right? Wow, you can cry out in pain, and people can just ignore your pain. People can just ignore what you're going through. And sometimes we think that about God, that we're crying out to God and God is numb to it, or he's numbing himself. He sees it, but it's not moving him. So sometimes when we go, some first people will come up for prayer. they really cry, and not because they're in pain, but also because it's maybe the more I cry, the more this will convince God that this is really important to me. And we do that when we're asking for something. You got to convince that person, let them know how important. And God is not that way. He knows what's going on. But Joseph has learned you can cry and cry and cry and cry, and people can just numb themselves to what you're going through because he's thrown into the pit, he's sold into slavery, he's working for Potiphar, he gets thrown into prison, he interprets dreams, he's still in prison, and this is 13 years before the dream happened. It was 13 years, and then 2 more years. Oh, this is actually 9 more years because there was 7 years of. Yeah, okay, so it's been 22 years since they've seen their brother. Um, but it's 13 years at least of him being in a bad way, and he developed calluses like God doesn't really hear. So hearing this, wow, they did hear what I was going through, and it moved them. That touches him. That's why he starts crying. But anyway, he says they sat down to eat a meal. They sell him to Judah. And so Judah says to his brother, it's important that Judah is the one that says, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother, he's our flesh. And the brothers listen. So they sell him to the Ishmaelites, right? Judah at that point could care less. Now, in the very next chapter, Judah has this experience with Tamar, his daughter-in-law, and Shelah, one of the sons. Um, and you remember Judah has 3 sons. The first 2 died. The first 2 married to Tamar. The third one is a couple years too young. So he says, you have to wait till he's 18 and then you can marry him. And then he turns 18. It says he becomes of age, and they forget about this promise. So Tamar has married the first son, married the second son. She's supposed to marry the third son. Nothing. She's going to be childless. So she tricks Judah, who's forgotten about his promise, into having sex with her. So, and she gets pregnant, and then she reveals to him, "You're the one that did this," and he actually repents. That's the point of that story is Judah's heart beginning to change. Wow, your righteousness is better than my righteousness. And he actually feels for somebody, which is not his way. His way is, let's just sell him off to the Ishmaelites. So we see a change. That chapter is put there on purpose. It's important that Judah emphasizes the one who says, nah, just sell him off to Egyptians. Reuben's trying to help because Reuben and Judah, you'll see, will become prominent in the story. But Judah has a change of heart. Okay, so then Reuben said I'm still in chapter 37, just reviewing. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit because they had sold him while Reuben was gone. And he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, oh, the lad is no more. Where shall I go? Meaning, how am I going to go back to my father's house and tell him that something's happened to Joseph? I'm already in trouble. I might as well just live in the hills or something, right? Because he's already mad at me at one thing, and I'm the oldest, and I'm supposed to be watching over Joseph, and he's gone. Well, they tell him he's not gone. We sold him to the Israelites, which is as good as gone. Because again, when the brothers show up in Egypt, they assume Joseph is dead because they say we have one brother who is staying with the father, and the other brother is no more. He's dead. So in their mind, selling him to the Ishmaelites is as good as killing him. So they come back. They go to Jacob and make up this story, just like Jacob made a story to his father and tried to fool him. They go to Jacob and say, "Oh, see this coat? It's all bloody." So he assumes that Joseph is dead, but he's not totally clear. Did an animal kill him, or did they kill him? Because he's not as dumb as Joseph. He was aware that they hated Joseph. So but either way, he's dead. So he's very upset. So Reuben says, now I'm back in Genesis 42, and then I'll be finished with my review. Reuben answered them saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? Like, I'm the one to try to protect him, and you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter, and he turned himself away from them and wept because of what he heard. They heard the anguish, and Reuben did plead for me, and now they're upset about it. Oh, God does hear that story I told myself that they, that no one cared about my feelings. Because sometimes when we're in a horrible situation and things are going on, we think God doesn't care. I'm going through all this, and why hasn't God rescued me from this? He must not really have emotions like we do. He must not care. It's a lie. We don't know that. Oh, no, no. God's like, I'm way ahead of you on this. I've already sent provision. I've got a Joseph that I've sent way ahead of you to meet you at the other side of this. But we don't know that. We think, and that's why we get stressed out. That's why they'll drink or they'll do it because they think I'm in this all by myself. God doesn't care about all the pain I'm in. These are not people who don't believe in God. These are Christians who believe in God, but just think he's watched me go through this. He must not care. So that's how Joseph felt, right? That's the first stronghold broken, right? Oh, they did hear. They do feel sorry, right? And he's weeping. They don't know why this guy's weeping. Then he returned to them again, and he talked with them, right? And told them the plan. And okay, so the new plan is um, you're going to pick one person to stay instead of picking one person to go. Now, please note, Joseph doesn't know if Benjamin really is alive. They really could be lying because that's his last experience with him. So he's thinking, if I just send one person and there is no Benjamin, he can't come back. So I'm just going to be stuck here with these 9 brothers in jail. Let me send 9 brothers. One can stay. And then if if it's all a lie and if the father's dead, if Benjamin's dead, then at least they will have their food, you know, and then I don't know what I'll do with the one person, but they'll never see them again. So, um, so you pick the one person who should stay. Okay, so then he talked with him, it says, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So they picked Simeon because Simeon was the one that was responsible for this trouble, right? He's the one, and that's his and again, okay, in Genesis 34:25, when they find out that their sister Dinah had been raped by the Hamor, the prince of Shechem, it says in Genesis 34:25, now it came to pass on the 3rd day after they had tricked them and said, okay, you can marry Dinah. You just have to get circumcised. All you grown men and adults, we're just going to circumcise you real quick. We have no anesthesia. We don't have any really sharp knives. We're just going to cut you with these rocks. And then it's going to take like 3 days of bleeding. And then you'll be cool. So it says, now it came to pass on the 3rd day when they were in pain that the 2 sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took a sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. So Simeon and Levi were both in it. Simeon must have been the one who was much more, but it was both of them. It was definitely both of them, and that's very important. Because in Genesis 49, once Jacob has shown up, so I'm just skipping ahead. Once Jacob has shown up and he's blessing all of his sons, Jacob's about to die and he's blessing all 12 of his sons. Here's what he says about Simeon and Levi. In Genesis 49, verse 5, it says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Now, they're all brothers, but he means, no, they're brothers. They're of one mind. He says, Simeon and Levi are brothers because he blessed them. Everyone else got an individual blessing. Simeon and Levi, he put together. He said, Simeon and Levi are brothers, instruments of cruelty, or another word you can translate that word cruelty as violence, are in their dwelling place. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. So I'm putting a curse on their anger. I'm cursing. I'm hoping it will wither up and dry because it is fierce. This is verse 7. And their wrath, for it is cruel. I'm going to do 2 things. I will divide them in Jacob, and I'm going to scatter them in Israel. So they both got this curse, but he divided them in Jacob. And I'm just previewing, because we're going to read through Exodus next, that when they got to the wilderness, there was a division between Simeon and Levi. And Levi then gets elevated to the priest. Now, why? What happened that Simeon and Levi, they're both cruel. And Simeon got real. Moses didn't even pronounce a blessing on Simeon when he divided up the land when they're about to go into the promised land. Simeon didn't get nothing. Okay. Simeon's tribe dwindled down. Numbers 26:22 says, these are the families of Judah, according to those who were numbered with them, 76,500. So when they came out of Israel 200 years later, of the tribe of Judah, there were 76,000. The tribe of everybody, there were 60,000. The tribe of this one, there were 64,000. There were 66. So there's usually the lowest was like 45,000. In Numbers 26:14, it says, these are the family of the Simeonites, 22,200. So they're the smallest tribe. There's only 22,000. There's 76,000 from Judah. There's only 22,000 from Simeon. So their tribe is shrunk down. And they eventually, when he passes out the land in Deuteronomy 33, you'll see that Moses is saying, and you get this land, and you get that land, and Simeon's not even mentioned. The Levites are scattered in that every tribe had to take one of the Levites, because at this point they had been elevated to priests. So the Simeonites are just so decreased that Judah took them with them. In fact, in Joshua 19:1, it says, the second lot came out for Simeon when they were casting lots for the tribe of the children of Simeon according to their families, and their inheritance was within the inheritance of the children of Judah. So Judah got all this land. And when that lot came out of where they should go, it was like, you just go with Judah. Judah will give you a little piece of his land. So Simeon didn't even really get any land. So there were the 10 tribes up here, and then Judah. Simeon just got sucked in there. He never really got his own land. And the Levites were scattered. Everybody had to take one of the Levites, right? So they actually had 46 different places that they were sent. So they were scattered. So they were divided, where Simeon is decreasing, Levi's elevated. In Exodus, I'll tell you what happened. How come Levi got off the hook? I'll tell you. It's so fascinating. But then they were scattered. Levi was scattered, and Simeon just totally. So when they said, who's going to stay? Who is going to stay? The other 9 brothers can go. And Joseph's thinking they'll never come back because they're lying about Benjamin being alive. They all went Simeon because he's crazy. So Genesis 42:25. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks grain, to restore every man's money to a sack. Now, they don't know that. They're getting their sacks filled with grain, and they have no idea that that they're also putting money back in each sack. So that, because they paid for the grain and stuff as much as they could afford, but he said, put their money back in. Because he's thinking they're going to go, they're not coming back. If when they get back, well, I'll tell you what okay, so he's putting money in, but they don't know this. And he gave them provisions for the journey, thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with grain, and they departed from there, having no idea there's money in their sacks. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkeys feed at the encampment, so they got, I don't know, halfway there, halfway back, it's like 200 miles that they had to go. He opens, I'm going to feed one of my donkeys. One guy notices there's money in there. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. One brother. And it says, then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? Right? They think it's an accident. Like, oh no, they actually put the money back in one of their sacks. They're going to be upset with us. They're going to come after us and think that we robbed them. Why did God allow? They don't think this is Joseph doing this. They just think, and they're right. It was God was ultimately behind it. But what is this as God has done? We're in trouble because now they're going to think that you stole the money, you one brother, and oh man, right? Because it would never occur to them that this would be done out of some kindness. We know this because in the next chapter, in Genesis chapter 43, when they did finally come back, in Genesis 43:32, it says, so they set him a place by himself and then by themselves. So they've come back to Joseph. Joseph sits all by himself, and the Jews, the 12, the 10 sons that are left of Israel are sitting by themselves. It says, and Egyptians who ate them by themselves. Now, the Egyptians, they know that Joseph is really an Israelite. The brothers don't. But Joseph, we're about to eat, and I know you run everything, but you got to sit by yourself. Your brothers, they got to sit by themselves. We're sitting by themselves. It says, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So oh, you can run everything, but we are not eating with you because you're nasty. We have a standard, exactly. So they're not because the Egyptians, yeah, we need you for this reason, but we sure do hate you. So they can never imagine that the brothers, oh, they did this, weren't they sweet? They put this money back. It's like, no, this was a mistake. God allowed this somehow, and we must still be being punished, right, for what we did to Joseph. That's all they could imagine. So Genesis 42, verse 29. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is Lord of the land spoke, they don't know that it's Joseph, he spoke roughly to us and took us for spies for the country, but we said to him, we are honest men. Now they're having to explain this whole story so they can explain. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed that Simeon is not with us. So they're like standing in a row and they're about to reveal, and okay. So they have to explain the whole story. So we said to him, we're honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. So we were trying to convince him we're not spies. Then the man, the Lord of the country, so like it wasn't just some man, it was the Lord of the country, said to us, by this will I know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households and be gone, and bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men, and I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. So this is they're saying, so it's not our fault. We said that we had a brother here, and he wanted to see that brother, so that's why we were forced to leave Simeon there. So the father's upset, obviously. In fact, in the next chapter, he says, why did you have to tell them that you had another brother up here? That's so stupid. Have you not? So he's upset, but there's nothing to do about it. Then it happened, it says, verse 35, that they emptied their sacks. That surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in the sack. Each of us have it. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid again, like they're going to literally attack us now. Joseph is thinking maybe, because why would they come back and bring Benjamin? The Israelites are enemies of the Egyptians. They're not going to come, even if Benjamin is alive, they're not going to come back. But maybe if I put money in their sack, they'll go, oh, look, that nice man, they actually gave us money, and then maybe they will bring Benjamin back. He does not know. But if they stay, fine. At least I've gave them food, because maybe Benjamin is dead. And they've got money, they can buy grain from somebody else later, or who knows. So, but none of that worked on them. All they could think of, we're going to be killed. Right? So they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, this is verse 36, you have bereaved me. Now, he says, you have bereaved me, which is fantastic. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me. Like, I know. So how can I sent Joseph to you, and somehow he mysteriously died. I sent you all down there, and Simeon is no more. They're going to kill him. And you can say, oh, yeah, I'll take Benjamin. Sure. So, but Reuben spoke to his father, saying, kill my two sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. Now, let me tell you why this did not fly with the dad. In Genesis 49, the dad spells it out to Reuben. When I remember he's praying for all this, because they do go down there eventually, but it wasn't Reuben who talked him into it. In Genesis 49, verse 3, when he's praying for all the sons, he starts with Reuben. He says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength. You're my firstborn, the excellence of dignity and the excellency of power, unstable as water. You shall not excel. I can't count on you for nothing. That's like trying to walk on water, you are unstable as what? Do you know that I can't? What? And that's his opinion of him. First of all, he's saying a goofy thing. If I don't bring him back, kill two of your grandchildren. Okay, that's fair. That's what I'll do. That's such a good. That really convinced my heart, because now I know if Simeon doesn't come back, Benjamin doesn't come back, I'll just kill two of my grandchildren and that'll solve it. So thank you for that, Reuben. You crazy. So he totally ignores that, right? But he said, "My son shall not go down with you, Reuben, for his brother is dead and he's left alone. And if any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the it would kill me. You bring it to the grave." So Joseph died. If Benjamin goes and there's somehow, oh, how did he accidentally get killed? Are you crazy? So no, I just apparently we lost Simeon, and that's just. But I'm not losing Benjamin. So, but nice try, Reuben. And that's where the chapter ends. And God, so Reuben is falling out of favor. You're going to see Judah in the next week fall into favor, and ultimately we're going to see why God chose the line of Judah and who He is and how He's going to teach His children to bring the Messiah from, and not Joseph. So I don't know, and people just love to praise them some Joseph. They wrote a musical called Joseph, but Joseph was used by God for sure. But Joseph has a problem, and there's a reason why he wasn't ultimately picked for, and how he's going to teach his children. God said, "Nope, I'm choosing Judah because the way he's going to raise his family and what he's going to pass down, the line can come through him." Okay, so three reasons that Joseph cried. Joseph cried three times. We're going to go over Joseph's tears. We're going to go over Reuben descending Judah, ascending over Joseph. And then I'll be more specific about Simeon and Levi. Since they both were crazy, why did Simeon stay in trouble? And how come Levi was just elevated to they became the priests? It's really fascinating. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sorry that I was late. But I really appreciate that you take the time. I am preaching at my church today at 11 o'clock. Actually, it'll probably be 11:10 by the time I actually get up to preach. And we're going through the book of Joshua, and I'm on Joshua chapter 3. On Wednesday nights, I'm going through the book of Matthew, and I've started John. Help me. I don't know where I am. We started the first chapter of John. And I like to just go straight through books. So, and once we finish Genesis on Sundays, we'll just go to Exodus. Because you can understand the story better when it's told consecutively as opposed to picking and choosing different parts. Okay, so thank you so much, all of you who are listening, and God bless you. I will see you soon. All right, bye-bye.